Herb had just filled his second cup of coffee. The kitchen still smelled like toast. Through the window, the light rain in Portland made that quiet sound he had learned to love after he retired, because now he did not have to go out in it. The phone rang at 8:17. It was his financial advisor. The call lasted 4 minutes. When he hung up, he set the phone on the table and stared at the cup. The coffee went cold. He did not drink it. $1,040,000. That is what Herb retired with 3 years ago. More than most people save in a lifetime. More than enough, or so every calculator, every article, every retirement seminar had told him. 1,100 miles south in Jacksonville, a couple named Lorraine and Stan were finishing breakfast. Stan poured a second cup of coffee. Lorraine opened her laptop to check their bank balance, something she does every Friday, out of habit, not anxiety. $510,000. That is what they retired with. Half of what Herb had. Half. Here is what nobody told either of them. Herb will run out of money at 79. Lorraine and Stan will still have reserves at 88. The man with double the money runs out first. That does not make sense until you understand the two clocks. Every retiree has two clocks running at the same time. The first clock counts down your portfolio, how many years your money will last. The second clock counts down your life, how many years you have left. When the first clock hits zero before the second one does, the game is over. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly where those two clocks cross for $100,000, $500,000, and $1 million for singles and for couples. And I am going to show you why the size of the number in your account matters far less than you think. Here is what the financial industry does not tell you about those two clocks. The biological clock runs at a constant speed, 1 year per year. No exceptions, no negotiation. The portfolio clock does not. It speeds up, it slows down, sometimes it reverses, and the speed of that clock depends on three variables that most people never sit down and calculate. The first is your effective withdrawal rate, not the one you planned, the one you actually practice. There is a difference, and that difference is where retirements go to die. The second is how many Social Security checks enter your household every month. One check or two. That single variable changes everything more than most people realize. The third is what happens in the market during your first 5 years of retirement. Not your last 5, your first 5. Because what happens in that window determines 70% of whether your plan survives or fails. That is not an opinion, that is Morningstar's data. Three variables, three invisible forces pulling on the speed of your portfolio clock. And the number in your account, 100,000, 500,000, $1 million is just the starting position. It does not tell you how fast the clock is ticking. Let me show you. And I am going to start with the smallest number, because that is where the mechanics become impossible to ignore. Vera is 63 years old. She lives alone in a small apartment in Greenville, South Carolina. She worked as an administrative assistant for 26 years. Nothing glamorous, nothing high-paying, but steady. She has $97,000 between a savings account and a small IRA. Her husband passed 6 years ago. She did not inherit wealth. She inherited discipline. Vera collects about $1,850 a month from Social Security. Her total monthly expenses run about $2,400. Rent, utilities, groceries. Medicare supplement, gas. That is it. No vacations, no renovations, no surprises she can afford. The gap between what Social Security covers and what she actually needs is $550 a month. That is $6,600 a year. From a portfolio of $97,000, that is a withdrawal rate of 6.8%. Let me put that in context. Morningstar's current research says 3.9% is the safe starting withdrawal rate for a 30-year retirement. Vera is pulling nearly double that. Now, here is what happens. In a stable scenario, average market returns around 6%. Inflation around 3%. Her money lasts roughly 18 to 20 years. Her portfolio clock hits zero around age 82. If her biological clock runs to 85 or beyond, she has a gap. 3 years, maybe 5, with no cushion at all. In an adverse scenario, a bear market in the first 3 years, healthcare inflation running at 5 or 6%, her money lasts 11 to 13 years. The portfolio clock hits zero at 75. That is 12 years before the average female life expectancy. With $100,000, the portfolio is not the engine. It is the spare tire. Social Security carries the weight, but spare tires have an expiration date. And at 6.8%, that date is closer than most people think. Here is the part that does not get discussed enough. The erosion is not linear. It accelerates. During accumulation, compound interest works in your favor, your money grows, and the growth generates more growth. In retirement with withdrawals, the process reverses. Each withdrawal reduces the base that generates returns. So the next withdrawal represents a slightly larger percentage of a slightly smaller portfolio, and the withdrawal after that is larger still. The speed of depletion does not stay constant. It increases. At 6.8%, that acceleration is brutal. Now here is the twist. If Vera had a spouse collecting their own Social Security, say the two of them brought in $3,700 a month, combined the gap drops to zero. Maybe it even goes positive. The spare tire would last indefinitely, not because the tire got bigger, because it would never need to be used. That is the difference between one clock ticking towards zero and one clock that barely moves. Vera does not have that luxury. She has one check, one income stream, one person absorbing every cost: rent, insurance, food, medication, car maintenance, every last dollar with no one to split it with. And the portfolio that is supposed to fill the gap is shrinking faster than it can regenerate. She is not doing anything wrong. She is not spending recklessly. $2,400 a month in Greenville, South Carolina is not extravagant. It is survival. But survival at 6.8% has a timer on it, and the timer does not care how careful she is. That is the power of two checks. Remember that. It comes back. You already met Lorraine and Stan, the couple in Jacksonville finishing breakfast. The laptop open on a Friday, out of habit. Let me fill in the picture. Lorraine managed human resources for a regional hospital system for 22 years. Stan sold insurance, commercial policies, nothing fancy. They have been married for 39 years. They are 65 and 67. They take one trip a year. They eat out on weekends. They buy their grandchildren gifts that are generous but not extravagant. Their combined Social Security comes to about $3,800 a month. Their total monthly spending runs about $4,800. The gap is $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. From a portfolio of $510,000, that is a withdrawal rate of 2.4%. 2.4%. Let that settle. In a stable scenario, their money lasts 35 years or more. The portfolio clock and the biological clock never cross within any reasonable life expectancy. They die with money left over. In an adverse scenario, a bad sequence of returns in the early years, persistent inflation, an unexpected medical bill, their money lasts 27 to 29 years. The clocks cross around age 93. For both of them to outlive their money, they would need to live well beyond the average life expectancy, together while spending consistently at the higher end of their range. The math on this is not complicated. It is just invisible to most people. Lorraine and Stan's strength is not the $510,000. It is the two Social Security checks that absorb most of the load. At 2.4%, the reverse compounding effect barely exists. The portfolio shrinks so slowly that market returns offset most of the withdrawals. Some years, it actually grows. Compare that to Vera. Vera with $97,000 needs a 6.8% withdrawal rate. Lorraine and Stan with 5 times more money need 2.4%. But the real difference is not the portfolio size, it is the second check. 2 incomes, 1 household. The gap shrinks, the portfolio breathes. Think about what that means structurally. Lorraine and Stan do not need their portfolio to fund their retirement. They need it to supplement a retirement that Social Security already funds 80% of. Their $510,000 is not the engine, it is the cushion. And a cushion at 2.4% can last a very, very long time. There is another layer here that most people miss. When 2 people share a household, the expenses do not double. Housing is the same, utilities are nearly the same, 1 car covers most trips. Groceries go up, but not by 100%. The per-person cost of retirement drops significantly in a couple, while the income from 2 Social Security checks nearly doubles. The math tilts in their favor at every level. Lorraine checks the balance on Fridays, not because she needs to, because 39 years of managing a household budget built a habit she sees no reason to break. Stan does not check at all. He pours the coffee and reads the news. They are not worried. They are not even thinking about it. That is what 2.4% feels like from the inside. Quiet, unremarkable, boring. And that is exactly why it works. So now the obvious question. Herb has $1,040,000, double what Lorraine and Stan have. If $500,000 lasts 35 years for a couple, then $1 million should be untouchable for a single person, right? You remember the phone call. 8:17 on a Tuesday morning, 4 minutes, coffee going cold. Let me tell you what Herb's advisor told him, and then let me tell you what really happened. Herb is 66, single. He worked in systems engineering for 31 years. He retired with $1,040,000 between a brokerage account and an IRA. He earned every dollar. He had no inheritance, no windfall, no lucky stock pick, just decades of consistency and a good salary. His Social Security check is about $2,300 a month. Solid, above average, but it is one check, not two. Herb's monthly spending is about $6,000. He does not think of himself as extravagant. A nice apartment in Portland, dinners out a few times a week. A new car. Not a luxury car, but a new one. A trip to see his daughter in Denver every few months. He figured with $1 million, this was reasonable. The gap between his Social Security and his spending is $3,700 a month. That is $44,400 a year. From $1,040,000, that is a withdrawal rate of 4.3%. In a stable scenario, consistent returns, no early shocks, the money lasts about 26 years. The clocks cross around age 92. That works. But Herb did not get the stable scenario. In his first year of retirement, the market dropped 15%. In his second year, it dropped another 8%. Year 3 was flat, and during all 3 of those years, Herb kept withdrawing $44,400 because that was the plan, because that was what $1 million was supposed to support. Here is what the math did to him. In year 1, his portfolio dropped from $1,040,000 to about $840,000, the market loss. Plus his withdrawals. He did not withdraw 4.3% that year. He withdrew the equivalent of 5.1% because the base had shrunk, but the spending had not. In year 2, the portfolio dropped again. Now he was pulling from $730,000. His effective withdrawal rate climbed to 6.1%. The reverse compounding accelerated. Each withdrawal ate a larger share of a smaller pie, and the portfolio lost the critical mass it needed to recover when the market eventually turned around. By the time the market came back, the damage was structural. The engine was too small to generate the returns that his spending required. The clocks were converging, and nothing short of cutting his lifestyle in half would slow them down. Herb's money in this scenario lasts about 13 years. The clocks cross at 79. Lorraine and Stan with half the money will still have reserves at 88. Let me say that clearly. The man with double the money runs out 9 years earlier. Morningstar's research confirms that poor returns in the first 5 years of retirement account for 70% of plan failures. Wade Pfau's data goes further. 77% of a portfolio's final outcome is determined by the returns of just the first 10 years. Not the last 10, the first 10. Herb is not a cautionary tale about reckless spending. $6,000 a month on $1 million portfolio does not sound reckless. It sounds like the life the money was supposed to buy. That is what makes this dangerous. The confidence that $1 million creates is precisely the poison that accelerates the clock. And here's the cruelest part. Herb saw the market recover. In year 4, returns came back, 8%. In year 5, 12%. On paper, the market corrected itself. But Herb's portfolio did not recover with it. Because recovery requires mass. You need enough capital in the account for the gains to matter. By the time the market turned around, Herb had already sold so many shares at a loss that the remaining balance was too small to benefit meaningfully from the rebound. The recovery happened around him, not inside his account. That is the reverse compounding in its most destructive form. Not a crash, not a catastrophe, just a slow structural erosion that looks manageable year by year and becomes irreversible by year 5. 4.3% feels safe. It is not. Not for a single person, not with one Social Security check, and not if the market decides to test you early. So the question becomes, what if Herb were not single? What if the same 1 million belonged to a couple? This is where the math stops being abstract and starts being personal. At $100,000, a single retiree's clocks cross somewhere between age 75 and 82, depending on market conditions. A couple at the same level, 85 to 90 or beyond. The second Social Security check reduces the withdrawal rate so dramatically that the spare tire barely gets used. At $500,000, a single retiree's clocks cross between 82 and 88. A couple, 93 or later. In many scenarios, the clocks never cross at all. The portfolio outlives both of them. At $1 million, the range for a single person is the widest of all three tiers, somewhere between 79 and 92. That is a 13-year spread, the largest variance in the entire table. With discipline and favorable timing, $1 million lasts longer than anything. With confident spending and bad timing, it lasts less than $500,000 in a couple's hands. A couple with the same $1 million, 95 or later, often never. Two checks absorb the spending pressure. The portfolio's job changes from primary engine to backup system. The pattern is the same at every level. Two Social Security checks change the outcome, more than doubling the portfolio does. The second check is not a bonus. It is the structural difference between a plan that survives and a plan that depends on luck. Look at that $1 million single column again. 79 to 92. 13 years of variance. That means the exact same portfolio, the exact same starting balance, can produce two completely different retirements depending on behavior and timing. No other tier has that range. At $100,000, the margin is narrow because the portfolio is too small to swing outcomes dramatically either way. At $500,000 for a couple, the two Social Security checks stabilize everything. But at $1 million for a single person, there is enough money to feel safe and enough rope to hang yourself. The portfolio is large enough to sustain high spending for a while, and that while is where the illusion lives. This is the factor that almost nobody models. Financial calculators ask for your balance, your expected return, your withdrawal amount. They do not ask whether you are funding one life or two lives with one income stream or two, and that omission is where the danger hides. So if the number in your account is not the deciding factor, what is? Three things. The first is your effective withdrawal rate, not the percentage you wrote down in a plan, the percentage you actually take. Herb planned for 4.3. He practiced 5.1 in year 1 and 6.1 in year 2. That drift less than 2 percentage points was the difference between the money lasting 26 years and lasting 13. Half the runway, erased by a withdrawal rate he never recalculated. The second is the timing of market returns, specifically what happens in your first 5 years. 70% of retirement plan failures trace back to poor returns in that window, not year 15, not year 20. The first 5. If the market gives you a bad hand early and you keep spending at the same rate, the reverse compounding locks in damage that good returns later cannot undo. The shares you sell at a loss cannot participate in the recovery. The third is the number of Social Security checks in your household, 1 or 2. That is the multiplier nobody talks about. It is not glamorous, it does not make for a compelling headline, but it is the single variable that most consistently separates retirements that survive from retirements that collapse under their own weight. Here is the psychological trap. The more money you have, the more you spend. That is not a moral failing, it is human behavior. Herb did not spend $6,000 a month because he was careless. He spent it because $1 million feels like permission. It feels like enough. It feels like the finish line. And that feeling, that quiet confidence, is what speeds up the portfolio clock without making a sound. Nobody warns you about this. Every article, every seminar, every calculator tells you to grow the number, hit the target, cross the line. But nobody tells you that the line itself creates a psychological shift, a feeling of arrival that changes your spending behavior in ways you do not notice until the damage is already structural. Vera cannot afford to feel confident, so she does not overspend. Herb can, so he does. The irony is that the person with the most money is the one most vulnerable to the behavior that destroys it. 3 steps. None of them are complicated, all of them matter. First, calculate your personal crossing point, take your estimated Social Security income, add any pension or fixed income. Subtract that from your real monthly spending, not your ideal spending, your real spending. The gap is what your portfolio needs to cover each year. Divide your portfolio by that annual gap. That is how many years until the clocks cross. And do not run the optimistic scenario. Run the adverse one. That is the number that matters. Second, stress test the first 5 years. Take your current portfolio balance, cut it by 20%. Now run your withdrawal plan against that reduced number. Does the plan survive? Does the money still last? If the answer is no, you have a plan that works only when the market cooperates. Adjust before you retire, not after. After is too late. Third, if you are single, plan as if you have 40% less. The absence of a second Social Security check is the invisible factor that most retirement calculators ignore. When you run your numbers with only one income stream, the margin for error shrinks dramatically. Building your plan around a portfolio that is 40% smaller than your actual balance creates the cushion that the missing second check would have provided. If you have $1 million and you are single, plan your spending as if you have $600,000. That is not pessimism. That is the math acknowledging what is missing. None of these steps require a financial advisor. None of them cost anything. All three can be done this weekend with a calculator and an honest look at your bank statements from the last 6 months. The crossing point is not a mystery. It is arithmetic. But it is arithmetic that most people never do because the number in the account feels like the answer. It is not. It is the starting position. The answer is the speed. Back to Portland. Back to the kitchen table. The rain is still falling. The coffee is still cold. Herb retired with $1,040,000 and the belief that the hard part was over. He had crossed the finish line. The number was big enough. The plan was simple enough. And for 3 years, everything felt exactly the way retirement was supposed to feel. Until the phone rang at 8:17 on a Tuesday. 1,100 miles south, Lorraine closes the laptop. The balance looks fine. It looked fine last Friday, too. She does not think about clocks or withdrawal rates or sequence of returns risk. She does not need to. The math is on her side, not because she has more, but because the structure underneath her retirement was built to absorb pressure that Herb's was not. Double the money, half the duration. The game was never about who had more. It was about who understood the speed of the two clocks. Here is what the financial industry wants you to focus on: the number. Grow the number, hit the number, celebrate the number, but the number is just what you see on the screen. The speed at which the two clocks converge is what decides whether that number lasts 15 years or 35. And that speed is determined by decisions you make in the first 5 years, decisions most people do not even realize they are making. The question now is whether you know how fast yours are running. Think about that. If this changed how you think about your retirement, leave a comment below. I will see you in the next one.